Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I am Syed Akif Shah, lecturer finance at Institute of Business Studies, Kohat University of Science and Technology. The title of this course is Principle of Accounting, and course code for this subject is BS 161. This is our lecture number 16, and the topic for today's discussion is analyzing economic transactions and making income statement and statement of cash flows from those transactions. Before starting this lecture, dear students, I strongly urge you to listen to my previous lecture number 15 because this lecture is basically in continuity to my previous topic. The outline of this lecture consists of the discussion related with the impact of economic transactions on balance sheet, as we have previously discussed, extracting or making of income statement and statement of cash flows from those economic transactions. So the basic agenda of this lecture is to give an overview to the previous topic and then to understand how to make income statement and statement of cash flow from different economic transactions. Here we had some economic transactions related with the JJ Lawn Care Service, where one by one we have discussed the economic transaction starting from May 1st, where the owner has invested $8,000 into the business, and then we have explained in detail what is the impact of this transaction on the balance sheet. So we will quickly move towards our next agenda. Then we had purchased the lawn mower and then shown the impact on the balance sheet. And in a similar fashion, we had my 8 transaction of purchasing truck, and then we have highlighted the impact of this transaction on the balance sheet as highlighted in red color in front of you. Then we had in my 11 where the company has purchased some of the repair parts and equipments. So this is just a quick overview or a quick go in order to know that we are going to discuss the previous example in further fashion. Then we had sold out certain repair parts to another lawnmower company, and then mention the transactions impact. So these were some of the transactions where we had shown the impact of those economic transactions on the balance sheets. I'll quickly go to the last slides where we have left, and this was our last slide where we have left our discussion in lecture number 15 by making and incorporating all the economic transaction into the balance sheet. Now let's review how the JJ transaction affected the accounting equation. Here it is the basic agenda of lecture number 16, and I assume that students have listened to my previous lecture before listening to these lectures. Accounting equation is basically assets are equal to liability plus owner equity, and this equation must be in the balanced form. We have obtained the title for assets which are cash, account receivable, tools and equipment, and truck from the previous example. Here you can see cash, account receivable, tools and equipment, and truck. And the same data has been taken for our discussion towards the making financial statements. So here we can see that the economic transaction in an accounting equation shape where each transaction has its unique impact on either one side of accounting equation or at the both sides. So we can see that my one cash $8,000 has been added, and at the right hand side capital stock was increased with $8,000. This was the first transaction. Let me show you. Here it is on May 1, 2003, Jill Jones and her family invested 8,000 in JJ Lawn Care Service and received 800 shares of stock. So cash was added, increased with $8,000, and in the right hand side, capital stock was increased by $8,000. So this is the way we are going to mention the impact of economic transaction on accounting equation. Another way around, we can also make transaction or statement which are pertaining to the economic transaction by looking at this table directly. Like May 2, we can see that $2,500 are in the parentheses or in the brackets, which is showing in accounting when there is parenthesis against any number or any figure, it means that something has been deducted or minus. So $2,500 deducted or subtracted from cash title, and similarly $2,500 has been added under the column of tools and equipment. Dear student, we can directly make a statement pertaining to my two transaction in this fashion. A company has purchased tools and equipment or a lawn mower $2,500 and paid in cash. This is the way you can incorporate all the transactions in this accounting equation. Let's check out another one which is pertinent to May 8. You can see that May 8, $2,000 are in parentheses deducted. It means cash outflow has been occurred against the column truck. So we can make a statement that JJ Lawn Care Service has purchased truck at a cost of $15,000, paid out $2,000 in cash, and the remaining amount is termed as notes payable. It means that the company has signed a note payable for the remaining because the company do not have enough amount of cash to purchase $15,000 of truck, because the balance of cash is only $5,500. However, the cost or price of the truck is $15,000. Therefore, the company has signed a legal document or a legal promissory note to pay out this amount in future. This is the reason it has been mentioned under the column of notes payable. Similarly, in May 11, $300 added in the tools and equipment and $300 added under the column of accounts payable. It means that company has purchased tools and equipment on open account, not on cash payment. We can see in May 18, $150 added in the column of accounts receivable. At the same time, $150 are in parentheses. It means this is supposed to be subtracted because the company might have had sold out tools and equipment to another lawn care service but did not receive any cash. Rather, these are on accounts receivable. Like the company has given them time to pay out this obligation. Let me show you the transaction of May 18. Rather the next one over here. See, you can see that on May 18, JJ was able to sell half of the repair parts to the ABC Lawn for $150 at a price equal to its cost. JJ will receive the cash within 30 days. It means that JJ did not receive any dollar against this transaction. This is the reason that it has been mentioned as account receivable $150. In the same fashion, my 25, my 28, my 29 transaction has been conducted. So let's discuss the final two. My 29, $750 added under the column of cash, and $750 added or mentioned as inflow in the retained earning column because the company has given services to its client and received $750 in cash. And in the last transaction, my 31st $50, or in parentheses, it means you have to minus this amount from the balance, which come up with 4,125. This account receivable column shows $75. Tools and equipment are 2,650. Trucks historical cost is 15,000 as it is. Notes payable, you did not pay anything. Accounts payable leftover are 150 because you have paid. The company has paid $150 over its liability in this month. $8,000 under the capital stock remains as it is, like owner did not withdraw any dollar from this business during this time period. And finally, we have $50 subtracted from retained earning because the company has paid gasoline charges against the services provided to the clients, as discussed in my previous examples. So listen to the lecture number 15 thoroughly and then listen to this lecture so that you may be able to understand what type of transactions we are dealing with in this lecture. So these are our final balances. You can counter check these balances from the last balance sheet what we have mentioned. Like you can see that truck cost was $15,000, so therefore in the transactions under the truck column you can see $15,000. Let's counter check the account payable. The final balance of accounts payable column is $150. So you can see that the final balance of accounts payable in the balance sheet is once again $150. Let's check out another one, which is the account receivable. Account receivables balance is $75. Let's counter check out in the balance sheet. So in accounts receivable, the final balance is $75. So this is the way you can directly show the impact of economic transaction either on the balance sheet, or another way around you can mention the impact of these economic transaction on the accounting equation in columnar fashion. Let me remove all these pointer and ink. So dear student, let's discuss that this first column is pertaining to the cash column. Starting from my 1st and ending at my 31st, we have different kind of transaction. Either these transactions are impacting as an inflow towards the cash or outflow. Like in my first transaction is showing inflow in the cash. My two as mentioned in the parentheses, so therefore it is showing as cash outflow, and all these transactions are relating, or these transactions impact the statement of cash flows. Once again, my 8 cash outflow, you can see nothing is there in against my 11. Similarly, nothing is against my 18, so no cash inflow, neither inflow nor outflow. My 25 shows $75 inflow, $150 outflow against my 28. Similarly, against my 29, $750 inflow, $50 outflow. So if you critically analyze the first column, which is of the cash column, you can easily make your statement of cash flows. However, looking at the right hand side where retained earning column is mentioned, this column is actually helping you out to make an income statement, which is the second financial statement and really very important. So these transactions impact the income statements. Let's check out how to make income statement and cash flow statement with the help of different economic transactions. Let's prepare out income statement and cash flow statement for May 31st, 2003. So the method to make an income statement is to write down the name of the business at top, as mentioned, JJ's Lawn Care Service. Then name of the financial statement, which is income statement. Here the pattern to write down the date is different than the balance sheet, which is for the month ended this May 31st, 2003. Since this covered the period of time, therefore the fashion or generally accepted accounting principle is to mention the date for income statement in this fashion. An income statement tells you about either the company is in profit or in loss for a specific time period. So the sales revenue, it has basically two titles. One is revenue and another one is expenses. We have to minus the revenue expenses from the revenue of the company for a particular period of time. So sales revenue, which is the JJ's lawn care service provided to different clients, and the client has paid $750 against the services what they have received. At the very same time, in order to deliver these services, the company has borne gasoline expenses. Since this is a simplest kind of income statement, so there are only two titles. One is revenue and the other one is expense. Gasoline expenses charges were $50. So let's put a parenthesis against them. We know that we have to minus all the expenses from revenue of the company in order to come up with net income or net loss. So either the company will be in profit or in loss. If the expenses exceeds the revenue, then company will incur loss. However, if the revenue exceed the expenses, as in our case, then the company will come up with net income. However, what if the total expenses were $1,050? Then ultimately the company might have been in loss of $300, and we have to put a parenthesis against this $300 in this case, because this shows company is in net loss. This is the way you can make an income statement by extracting data from the economic transactions and accounting equations. So we have basically taken this data to make an income statement. At the same time, if you are interested to make a statement of cash flow, which I have explained thoroughly in the physical classes as well, so you can pick up the cash columns data to make statement of cash flow for the period ended May 31st, 2003. Let's see. Here it is. The method or the mechanism to make the statement of cash flow is once again to write down the company's name at the top. Then the financial statement name, which is the statement of cash flow, needs to be written down. And in the third step, we have to mention the time period cash flow statement is covering. This statement is basically covering the period ended May 31st, 2003. Therefore, we have clearly mentioned that for the month ended May 31st, 2003. Cash flow statement has basically three important sections. One is known as cash flow from operating activities. The second section is pertaining to cash flow from investing activities, where the company is either purchasing an asset or selling down an asset. And the third section belongs to cash flow from financing activities. This section belongs to the financing art of managing money for the business organization. So if the owner is investing certain amount of money in the business, one has to write down that cash inflow in financing activity section. So this is basically the gap principles. Let's see that the first section is related with the revenue and expenses transactions. Since we have number of economic transactions as discussed in the previous example, so we'll discuss one by one and how to incorporate those transactions into the cash flow statement. But before understanding one by one, let me explain that the first section, which belongs to the operating activity, it includes only cash effects of revenue and expenses transactions. So we have to find out what are the revenue transactions and what are the expenses transaction in the given question. And we have to mention only revenue and expenses related transaction in the first section. The second section, which belongs to the cash flow from investing activity. So the rule is investing activities include the cash effects of purchasing and selling assets. If the company is purchasing an asset, like see purchase of a lawn mower, which is an asset, parenthesis depicts cash outflow, then you have to mention such transaction in the investing activities. However, we can also see that collection for sale of repair parts, when the company has sold certain amount of assets and received in the form of cash, then company is supposed to mention, or the accountant is required to mention, that cash inflow in the investing activities. The final section, which is cash flow from financing activities, here it is, the rule says financing activities include the cash effect of transactions with the owners and creditors. Like if the owner is depositing certain amount of money in the business, we have to mention that amount in the financing activities. Or another way around, if the company is looking to borrow certain number of dollars from the bank, in that case you have to mention those transactions in the financing activities. Now let's discuss those transactions one by one and how did we plug those data in this statement of cash flow. So we have to find out the cash received from revenue transactions. Let's move back towards the accounting equation. Here we had the expenses related and revenue related transaction number my 29 and my 31st. We can further go back to see the transactions of my 29. We can see that my 29 JJ's recorded lawn care services provided during May of $750 and all clients paid in cash. So since this is a cash transaction, therefore we have to mention this transaction in the statement of cash flows. As mentioned against the first transaction, cash received from revenue transaction $750. Basically, this statement has two major columns. One is a working column and this right side one is known as the final balance column. Once again, we have to check out the expenses in order to complete our operating activities section. So here it is, on May 31st, we can see that this transaction was giving us the data related with the expenses like JJ's purchase gasoline for lawn mower and the truck for $50 of cash. Therefore, we have to mention this transaction into the second part of operating activities, which is cash paid for expenses. This parenthesis or small bracket is representing the cash outflow, and when there is no bracket against any numerical value, it will represent cash inflow into the company. So we have to set off both of these values, as cash inflow is greater than cash outflow. So therefore, we have to mention that net cash provided by operating activities. If cash inflow were $50, would have been $50, and expenses would have been $750, then we have to mention a parenthesis against this number over here. If let's suppose this value was $50 and the expenses were $750 outflow, then this might have been the case over here. And net cash, rather than to write down provided by, you have to mention net cash used by operating activity in that case. But let's discuss what the actual case is. Here it is, the first section completed, and the net cash provided by operating activity is mentioned in the final column against first section. Now let's discuss the second section, purchase of lawn mower. Let's go back towards the accounting equation. Purchase of lawn mower was on May 2nd. Let's go back further to May 2nd transaction. The transaction says that on May 2, JJ purchased a riding lawn mower for 2,500 cash. So this was basically the cash outflow transaction, and since the company has purchased an asset, therefore we were writing or inserting this amount into the cash flow statements, purchase of lawn mower. When the company purchased the lawn mower, it actually has paid out cash for purchasing the lawn mower. Looking further to complete the section of investing activities, we have analyzed that company has purchased a truck but did not pay full amount, which was $15,000. Rather, the company has paid only $2,000 against the purchase of truck. Therefore, the parenthesis shows cash outflow of only $2,000. Then we had collected certain amount of dollars against the sale of repair parts to ABC Lawn Mower. ABC had paid us $75 within a week. Therefore, we have mentioned it against the investing activities because an asset has been sold out, and this represents cash inflow rather than outflow. Therefore, no parenthesis is mentioned against this number. Finally, we had payments for the repair parts, where the company has purchased initially $300 worth of repair parts, and after a few days the JJ Lawn Mower has paid $150 against the liability. Therefore, 150 has been mentioned. We can directly collect this data from our first column of the accounting transactions. See, we have incorporated $2,500 to $2,000, then $75, $150. We are left with only, we have also incorporated $750 and $50. It means that we are left over with only May 1st transactions to be incorporated in our statement of cash flow. Let's move forward towards our cash flow statement. Here, after incorporating or inserting the relevant data into the appropriate section, we have to sum all the values. This represents negative value, positive value, and then a negative value. So the resultant cash outflow or a negative value come up against the four arithmetics operation against the four numerical numbers. Since this shows the grand outflow of 4,575 because this is in the parenthesis. Therefore, we have mentioned net cash used by this section rather than to be provided by operating activities. Let's come towards the final section, which is telling us cash flow from financing activities. And as we knew that only owner has invested $8,000 initially, this has also been confirmed from our first column's first transaction, my first, where the owner has invested $8,000, and as well as the capital stock was increased. But since this was in the form of cash, so therefore we are going to mention it in the cash flow statement. This represents that only those economic transactions which are in the form of cash must be reported in the statement of cash flow. So this represents the $8,000 of cash inflow by the owner. After doing that, we have to sum up the final column in order to reach at the either we are in increase in the cash for the month or we are in decrease in cash for the month. So 700 inflow, 4,575 outflow, and then 8,000 inflow. So by simple mathematical operations, we come up with 4,125. No parenthesis, it means there is an increase in cash for this month. Last step of this statement of cash flow is to incorporate the initial balance, cash balance on May 1st, 2001. So sometimes the question elaborates that the starting cash balance was, let's suppose, $100 or $200. So that data needs to be picked up from that question and to be plugged in over here. Since we have nothing in our initial cash, therefore nothing has been mentioned against the cash balance at the start of the month, which is May 1st, 2003. Once again, you have to put a single line and then mention your final balance, which is the cash balance at the end of the month, which is May 31st, 2003. So the final balance for this month, May 31st, 2003, is $4,125. Basically, this statement tells you about either the cash is coming towards the company or the cash is going out of the company. So another way around, we can say either there is cash inflow and outflow for a particular period of time, and against which titles and which expenses cash is actually going out of the company, and against which title and which transaction cash is coming towards the company or inside the company's treasure box. So this statement basically helps you out or helps the company to know the cash position of the company, which is the lifeblood to select, which is working as a lifeblood for any business organization, because the company has to select different investment projects on the basis of cash availability. So this statement is not only the gap requirement to be mentioned and made, but it also helps out the companies to know about the cash position. So this was all about the different economic transaction and their impact on balance sheet statement, balance sheet and the accounting equation. And then later on we can also extract our basic financial statement from those transactions, like making it helps us to make the balance sheet, it helps us to make income statement, and as well as statement of cash flow. Thank you very much for listening to this lecture. If you have any question or query, you can post them on KCMS, or another way around, you can also email me on my official email address with your queries, and I'll be happy to answer your question. Good luck for the day. Allah Hafiz.